You're listening to the Multifamily Mentor Show.
My name is Terrence Doyle.
And I'm Chris Lopez. You probably know us from the BiggerPockets Real Estate Ride Along Show. Well, now we're talking everything multifamily. We bring in top industry experts from around the country to come join us in our Denver studio for an in-depth, in-person conversation.
We're going to be diving deep into deals, underwriting, raising capital, and everything in between. Join the conversation.
What's up, BiggerPockets? Welcome back to their Multifamily Mentor Show. We have a great guest in our Denver studio today whose career has just been a rocket ship getting into real estate investing, buying deals, raising capital, all sorts of fun stuff. Terrence, how are you, my man?
Chris, I am super well. Happy New Year's. I think this is the first podcast of 2022, so Happy New Year's, and welcome to Multifamily Mentors. We have Esti, I may butcher this, so I'm apologizing in advance, Esti Lowenbein in the studio from New York.
Stoked to be here. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. So let me read a few of your accomplishments because they're long and I want to make sure we get it right. So Esti's background is super impressive. I mean, we've been talking for the last hour and a half. Typically, we start after like 15 minutes, someone in the studio, but we got to talking about your background and education and real estate and Israel, and time flew by. So I want to highlight your background for the audience to hear what you've done. So you have a master's in speech pathology. You have a passion for education, and you just started investing in real estate and learning about it 4 years ago. Prior to that, and you have a funny story, you did not even know what a mortgage was prior to 4 years ago. And you've currently done over $500 million in transactions in commercial real estate, raised over $50 million in equity. You recently just raised a fund, and you have a very contagious personality. You are a serial networker, and I think the audience is going to love your story. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. That's a great story of my life.
Yeah, and it's all true, so it's even better.
Thank you.
So, well, great. So take us back to the very beginning. You know, you have a background in education. You were a speech pathologist. That was your passion. You have 8 children, right?
Yes.
I don't even know how you have as much energy to do just with 8 children, let alone have done the deals you've been able to do. So walk us through kind of your full-time speech pathology, you're in education, and how do you what's the trigger that says, I want to start learning about real estate?
Yes, sure. I got my I got my speech language pathology license in 2007 when I was expecting my second child, where my professor begged me to go for my doctorate, and I'm like, don't you see my big, huge belly?
Right.
I was like, no, that's it. At first I thought if I'd go back to school for anything, it'd be law. My husband always told me I'd be a great lawyer. But fast forward, we were living in Brooklyn, New York at the time, and then we relocated to Rockland County, New York. The system of speech language pathology over there was very different than in New York. It was a little more difficult. I had to travel a lot, and I wasn't really up to that. Also, as my children were getting older, I was working with children, and then my kids were getting to the age of the children that I was working with in a school setting and in a clinic. And it was just too much for me, too draining for me to work with children and then come home to children every day. God bless those teachers that are also mothers. It was too much for me. I needed to meet some adults at some point in my day or my life. That, along with many other reasons, just not feeling good or just feeling depressed and down. I had a child with medical needs and everything together, just leaving my family in Brooklyn, moving to Rockland, really prompted me to want to do something more. I also wanted to learn more. I felt like I didn't know enough about finances, about real estate. I just felt like I didn't know, and I wanted to start learning. Once I started learning and committed to it, I haven't stopped. Additionally, my husband also had this little health scare. And although he was doing well in business, the business was heavily reliant on him. Mm. And that really woke me up one day, and I'm like, okay, I need to really start learning, really start getting knowledge, really start getting out there, meeting people, seeing what I can do best and contributing in some way. I also have a high maintenance lifestyle. So I was like, okay, it's only nice of me to contribute.
What does that mean? You like nice purses and shoes, vacations, or you want to expand on that?
Not really. I'm not into brand names or that stuff, but I like to feel secure and have a nice big house. And thank God with 8 children and private tuition, just do the math.
Especially in New York.
It's expensive. Yeah. It's expensive. I could put down a down payment every single year with the tuition I'm paying.
Yeah, I just did a financing deal with a REIT out of New York, Granite Point. And one of the gentlemen on the team said that, and his child, I think, is in 3rd grade, is over $50,000 a year for tuition for one child.
Okay,
So 8 children, I can understand the down payment thing. I mean, that makes a ton of sense. Here in Colorado, it's a little different. I'm from Iowa. Tuition's a lot less. But I mean, in New York, East Coast, and it's insane. It's basically college for children starting in like 3rd, 4th grade.
100%.
It's crazy.
Plus
so
more.
I understand the need to hustle and get into real estate.
Exactly. No choice.
So I love that background. I think it's amazing. One of the things that I've really enjoyed just in the short time that we've been spending together is just your desire to like learn. You're just an avid learner. Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe the genesis of that and where that came from?
Yeah. So when we bought our first house in Rockland County about 4.5 years ago, my husband took care of the entire process. I did not even know what a mortgage was at the time. And I share this because I think it inspires people to see that you can know absolutely nothing. And once you commit to learning, there's no end. Like you can know everything. And also there's so much to learn. You can never stop learning. But it gives people hope that they can do whatever they put their mind to.
So, I mean, we have a lot of people that want to do what you did. They want to do 180 degrees from their career, their degree, going to real estate. You did that. Like, what advice would you give them, or going back to 4 years and telling your younger self, like, what would you say? Hey, do 1, 2, 3. Like, how do you start that 180-degree shift?
So there's a lot of factors to that. I mean, I was lucky enough that my husband was bringing in the main income, so I had the ability and the flexibility to switch careers and try something out. Because that once you get involved in real estate, you don't make money initially. It could be the longest time before you make money, whether you're a realtor, investor, or a capital raiser. So you could be putting in hours and hours of work without getting paid for it. As a realtor, you get commission only once the property sells. So number one, you have to have that ability to be able to work for many hours without getting paid. So someone has to evaluate what works for their life. That's number one, if they want to make that switch. Number two, it's never too late to make the switch. Like if you're able to and you have the passion, do what you love, because every job comes with difficulties, good and bad. I heard Brandon Turner speak at BiggerPockets, and he was saying, like, when you work with your passion can also mean pain. So although you're doing something you like, it comes with difficulties. No job is super easy. So you have to really, really enjoy what you're doing, because there are tough days in every single job. So I tell people that if you want to switch careers and it works for you, go ahead, do what you love. Life is short. Enjoy what you're doing.
That's great advice.
That's super well said. Yeah, passion does not mean it's going to be easy.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It just means you're going to enjoy the process. So that's really well said. So you're transitioning, you move out. So for those, because I didn't even really know. So from Brooklyn to Rockland County was like an hour and a half. So you went from like high-rise living, city living, hustle and bustle to the country.
Yeah.
Your job had changed. Things in your family are changing. You're getting this real estate bug. So tell us about your first transaction in real estate. You started as a broker. You get your first listing. So talking about pain, talk about how difficult that was and that process.
I actually started on the residential end, even though I didn't want to. The broker that I joined, that brokerage recommended that I start on the residential side. I was showing people around, showing houses, and it was nice. It was like more intimate. You get to meet the people. You get to show them the houses. You get to see different designs, which was pretty cool. But I soon realized that I am not a good marriage counselor and I'm not a good psychologist. So residential real estate was not for me. I'm more of like matter of fact, commercial is more factual. It's more like, do the numbers add up, versus residential, which is more emotionally based. So I realized that commercial, although I always knew it confirmed it for me that commercial is where I need to be. It's like, do the numbers add up? Does the location fit my need? Are the returns going to be what I want? It's more of a factual yes, no situation than, do I like those bathroom tiles? Can I change them? Do I like this curtain? Etc.
It's a good definition of residential versus commercial. Well said from a female. That's great. Okay, so tell us about your first deal. You had a listing, right? So you were transitioned from residential to commercial. Tell us about your first commercial listing, your first experience in multifamily. So
I got in. My family had a property that they were wanting to sell, so I listed it for them, and that was a five unit property in Brooklyn, New York. Kind of run down. It was from my husband's grandparents, and they haven't really done any renovation in all those years, and they passed several years ago, so the property was in really poor condition. We promised to deliver. I listed it way before COVID, but we were having trouble selling it. And then we promised to deliver a vacant, and then COVID hit. And with all the eviction moratoriums in New York, it became super difficult to get the tenants out. We finally got 4 tenants out, and one old lady refused to go. She had nowhere to go. She refused to leave. Eventually, the family had to, or actually the buyer got involved and also tried to give her money, and eventually she left.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a long, long process, and that finally sold. Trying to remember exactly when, but several months ago for sure. So that was my first listing.
That was your first listing. And then, so talk about the transition from the brokerage to realizing, because I think this is a phenomenal story, from listing properties and helping people buy and sell commercial properties, which you were getting a lot of traction in, to raising capital. Talk about that transition and your first experience with that.
So I was selling a lot of properties, and I amassed a list of investors. And one day I sold a property. It was 6-unit, a 6-unit portfolio in Connecticut. I sold it to an individual, and he asked me to help him find an equity partner. Knowing nothing about equity, I just, said, okay, sure, no problem, I'll help you. And actually, within 2 phone calls, I was able to find him an equity partner. So I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is really cool. Let me see if I can do this more. I'm like, why not? Let me get involved in this. And that's literally how it happened. I never intended to get into it. I didn't know much about it at the time. But I kind of, took it on and here's where I am right now. Now I'm raising equity. I raised over 54 million in the last year and a half, and I'm loving it.
Yeah, so you really fell into a gold mine there, just realizing that you had this secret talent of connecting capital and all these things. So, one of the things we were all discussing was just the rules and regulations around it. So maybe even on that first deal, I think you were telling me you returned the capital because it wasn't structured correctly. So, I realize you're not an attorney, right? So anything you say is just based on your experience and you're not giving legal advice.
Right.
But talk to the audience a little bit about the difference between accredited, unaccredited, and the way that things need to be set up if you're going to help someone raise money.
Right. So at the time when I got involved in that property, I knew nothing about raising equity or the legalities. I quickly began learning. Once someone pointed it out to me that I don't know what I'm doing, I started learning, and I haven't learned since. I haven't stopped learning since. Excuse me. I haven't stopped learning since. I read books. I listen to podcasts. Anything about now capital raising is my main focus. Like all the books I've read lately were all about raising capital legally. Listening to podcasts, speaking to attorneys. I decided to open a private equity fund for that reason. And before I did, I spoke to about 14 SEC attorneys just to get their advice and feedback before I got started. So I want to make sure I'm doing everything 100% legally. And there are different ways you can raise money. And one thing I will advise people, if they're syndicating deals or raising money from limited partners, I highly advise you get an SEC attorney involved. Do not do it on your own. That's a big recommendation I can offer today. There are people doing it on their own, and it's all they need is for one thing to go wrong, and they're underwater. They're in trouble, hot water, more like it. Highly advise someone get an attorney involved. There are different ways one can structure a fund. When you file an exemption, which is a Reg D, there's a Reg D 506B, which you can only raise from friends and family, and you can take money from anyone. But if you're raising through a 506C, you can only raise from accredited investors, and you are allowed to advertise it, whereas a B cannot be advertised.
Right. And so define accredited, because I think that's a term everyone throws around. So can you help the audience understand accredited versus unaccredited? Yeah,
there are many definitions of accredited investor. Some of them being you have to have made $200,000 if you're a single individual and $300,000 for the last 2 years, and you plan on making it for the third year. You will also have to have $1 million in assets besides for your primary home. Those are just 2 of the definitions, but there are many more.
Yeah. So the benchmarks, because we raised a fund last year, and I went through a similar kind of training of just like, you can't talk about it like on a podcast. I can never talk about the fund. I can't talk about it publicly. I had to be very careful how we spoke about it and who we spoke to and who could actually be involved in the project and raising capital and how you compensate people. There's a ton of red tape around raising money. And I highly recommend getting an attorney, really learning about it, because there is a ton of opportunity. There's also a lot of regulation, and the SEC is cracking down on this. I mean, if you just Google it, there's a lot of stories of people getting hurt or just fined with not doing this process correctly. But $1 million in net worth and an average of $200,000 over your last 2 years in income are kind of the low level hanging fruit of how you define if someone's accredited or non-accredited. And you actually need to be able to prove that either yourself or them from a CPA. So it's not just someone telling you that. Like if someone just says that and you did not actually go and research it, you could get in trouble.
Exactly.
So you really want to be thorough. You want to be careful. There's a bunch of books. I mean, one of the ones you mentioned that I think changed your life was How to Legally Raise Private Capital.
Right.
And that was a book that you mentioned. I haven't read that book, but I've heard other people mention it.
Right.
So
By
there's
Kim
a lot
Lisa Taylor.
By Kim Lisa Taylor. That's right.
Yeah.
So a lot of things to read there. So talk a little bit about, maybe your first deal that you did. And I know you just did a deal in San Antonio, 108 units. So do you want to go into that and talk about how you met the sponsor, how you raised the capital, how you structured that, and go into some detail there?
Yes, sure. So the deal I syndicated in San Antonio was 108 units. That was a 506B. So the challenges of a 506B is that you can only raise from family and friends. You cannot advertise it. Each exemption comes with its own challenges.
So when you say advertise, what did that mean for that particular deal? You could not do like a webinar?
You may be able to do a webinar with people that are accredited.
Or that are accredited. Okay.
Yeah, or that you know.
Or that
yes,
you know.
you cannot share the details. You cannot share the returns and all the details with someone that you don't know prior.
Got it.
To the
You
deal.
don't know prior or that is not accredited.
Well,
correct?
no, a 506B, they don't need to be accredited.
Got it.
Yeah, you can't bring in someone to the deal that you didn't know before you went into contract on the deal.
Got it. Okay.
I believe that's what it is. You have to be in contract. You have to go into contract knowing everyone from before, and you can only use those people.
Okay,
Like
cool.
a pre-existing relationship.
Exactly.
That's the main thing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. So I joined as a co-GP. I joined wonderful sponsors. This is a team that I absolutely love. I highly trust them. Someone that I was in touch with for a long time. I knew his thought process on buying deals and what he looked for, and just his character seemed like a really nice person. I call him a real mensch, and a charitable person.
A real mensch.
So I was very excited to join with him. I do investor relations on the deal. I vet all the details. I underwrote the deal to the best of my ability, and put in my own equity and raised from others as well. And so far it's going great. It's a great deal.
So talk a little about it. So it's 108 units. And you guys closed last September. And, you said the purchase price was around $10 million?
10.7.
Okay.
Purchase price. The capital that we need to put into the renovations was about 1.3. We raised about 3.5. It's a garden style apartment complex in San Antonio. Great market. There were a lot of challenges with the property going in. There was a pile of documents, plenty of liens that we had to deal with before we actually bought the property. We got most of them off, but we did manage to close with some liens in place, and the money was put in escrow. So there were lots of challenges. We're doing a lot of rehab on the property, interior and exterior, and so far it's going great.
So it sounds like it's a value add property,
Exactly.
right?
Value
Kinda
add, raise rent.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, that property was on the market for a while, and we were eyeing the property for some time. And we put in an offer at the price that we felt we were comfortable with, and the property wasn't selling. That after over a year, the sellers came back to us and said, "We'll accept your offer."
Wow. Talk about patience there.
Yes.
Your guys' part, like, hey, you stick to your numbers.
Exactly.
You make the offer. If they don't take it, whatever, go on the next. But
Right.
sometimes they come back.
Exactly.
So one thing, as you were talking about this deal, and just as we've been, hanging out this morning, it sounds like, you're an amazing networker, an amazing connector, and sounds like you're very focused on, from my perception, a lot more on the person, like the operator versus the deal. Like, hey, I trust you. You're a good person. You have your act together. And it sounds like you're very person focused. Yeah. And that almost takes priority over the deal itself. Hey, if you say it's a good deal, I trust you. Is that a correct assumption?
1000%. Always start with the person. I always start with the sponsor. I always first try to see what kind of person what type of person the sponsor is. I always follow my gut. Like if I get a wrong vibe, I won't even go on to the next step. Once I like the person, I'll check their track record. I want to see what they've done. I want to see who invested with them in the past. I want to see if they have repeat investors. I love seeing repeat investors.
Yeah, let's talk about that more, because that was really interesting to talk about repeat investors, repeat customers.
Exactly.
Why is that important?
I was talking to someone that asked me to help them raise money, and he was in the self-storage business. He had sold off a massive portion of his portfolio to a REIT, and he said that his investors, most of them, were coming back in with him into another deal. And I was like, wow, I want to work with that person. When you have a large percentage of your past investors coming in with you into another deal, that speaks volumes. Because if you have a happy investor and they're ready to reinvest with you, that's the best feedback you can get.
Like it's so simple, and it's really like, going to like business 101. Hey, retain your customers before you get a new customer. But I've heard very few capital raisers talk about, hey, that's a very important, I guess, metric you look at or sign. But it's so simple and brilliant in my mind. I love it.
Right. Not always will people give me their investors, but I'd like to see that. I'd like to see past investors. I want to see what people have to say about them. And
there's no like certain threshold. Like, hey, I want a 20% or 50%. And you're just like, hey, if people are coming back and reinvesting again, great, thumbs up. If we're not, thumbs down.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. Every deal is so different, and every, not every investor wants to be known as well. Let's say not every passive investor wants people to know about them. So not everyone can let me know how many people are coming back or who is. But if you see some investors coming back, that's a big bonus. Also, it's always like you can have a good operator that can take a terrible deal and make it into gold, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. So I always go by the sponsor operator way before checking out the actual deal.
Great advice.
Yeah, one of the things that really got my attention, we were talking about that deal. I asked you, tell me about the sponsor, and you said you had gotten to know him over several years, and you had, been on his podcast, you'd had conversations with him, that he had done a bunch of webinars and in Zoom, and you had a lot of interactions with him. And so I think that's really key. So many people hit me up on LinkedIn or Instagram like, hey, I'm doing this deal. Will you partner? Will you raise money? Will you bring capital? Will you invest? And to me, relationship is the most important thing, because when you build a relationship with someone, and you mentioned this, you get to see how do they speak to their team members? How do they speak to their family? How do they handle when bad things happen? To me, like, everything looks really good when you send your underwriting in an OM. Everything looks amazing. You have all these returns and cash on cash, and it's like nothing can go wrong, right? But you get to really see what someone's like when things go bad.
Exactly.
Right? And the only way to do that is if you're with someone for a long period of time, right? I mean, Chris and I have been doing podcasts for 3 or 4 years now, and man, he sees me come in here and tell him some of the worst stories. Like, dude, we had a fire, we had a flood, we had mold, we had this contractor quit, this contractor screwed me, this team member left, this guy's... It's like, all you have is problems, right? But you don't get to see what someone's really like until you see how they handle problems.
100%.
And so I think for people out there listening, because I think, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, Esti, is this particular segment of multifamily, which is raising capital, connecting people. The way you call it is Esti, the matchmaker, right? You're a matchmaker. You know how to put people together that you're joining. We're going to talk about this in the next episode, which is taking people with sweat equity and putting it together with capital, right? Yeah. You know how to connect people that have a deal, know how to execute a deal with people that have capital that they're looking to place in all different shapes and sizes, right? But in order to do that, you have to have a relationship. And so I think one of the big keys for people out there that are like you, that are like, hey, maybe I'm doing something full time, but I want to get into real estate and I have this massive network and I don't know what to do with it, is build relationships.
Right.
Be an avid learner, right? Build relationships and learn. And those kind of two go hand in hand, because when you're learning, you're listening to podcasts. And then as you're doing that, you're probably getting on podcasts and you're setting up phone calls with those kind of people. And so I just think relationships is the foundation to connecting people and raising capital.
100%. Also, besides for just dealing with nice people, which is always a plus, it's your reputation on the line at the end of the day. If you're partnering with somebody and you're raising money from limited partners, you're just as liable as they are if anything goes wrong. So you want to be able to, reputation is all you have in this business. Everything's your name. And you need to maintain that reputation. You need to deal with partners that will only do right by investors if something goes sour with the deal.
100%. Your reputation is everything. And so as soon as you raise capital for a deal, you better be prepared to answer questions and to even put money in the deal if it goes bad, or to return money to LPs. I mean, absolutely. Because once you raise money for a deal and it goes bad, you may never be able to raise money again.
100%.
Because bad news travels really fast. good news is going to go on its own. This is one of the things I like to tell our team is like, when there's something bad, we want to get out in front of it. We want to tell everybody because bad news travels super fast. Get out in front of it. And good news is going to go on its own. You don't need to share good news, right? And, social media is going to be able to tell that story for you. But bad news, man, it's going to go much faster than you think. So for people out there listening that want to raise capital, can you share like maybe how much time it took for you to raise that capital on that deal? How many conversations you had to have? Maybe talk about some of the rejection or the resilience you had to have, when you're raising millions and millions of dollars.
So I was lucky that I started as a broker and I had a list of investors in my back pocket that I was able to reach out to and see if they'd want to co-sponsor with someone else. If they'd want to join a deal as another person, like you said, I'd bring the capital and partner them up with the sweat equity. That's my specialty, connecting co-GPs and JVs together. Then I'm less picky as who I connect because they have to like each other. They don't have to like me. They're partnering up. But if I'm raising money from limited partners, that's where I'm going to do all my due diligence, all my research. I'm going to check out the sponsor, check out their background, and I want to see their track record, and then I will underwrite the deal as well. I want to underwrite it for myself to make sure that it's a solid deal. I'm super, super picky about which deals I go into, raising from limited partners, and I have to be. I have to like the terms of the deal, the length of the hold, the period hold. I have to like the returns that they're offering to the investors, the location, the whole story. Everything has to make 1,000% sense. But advice I can give to anyone getting in, it's first of all, always double check everything you're doing with your attorney. I even like any email I'll send out, I'll have my attorney look it over just to make sure that it's 100% correct. And there's no room for errors in this field. And just go out there and make connections. You never know who's going to be your next partner, investor. You just really don't know. Be nice and get out there and make connections.
Yeah, and obviously these things come natural to you. You have a great personality. It's very contagious. You have a lot of energy, and you just want to learn. I think one of the things that I love from the first time we spoke is you're very upfront about, hey, I just started 3 or 4 years ago, but I'm super passionate. I'm all in, and I'm just looking to learn and network. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's people that have been doing it for 20, 30 years, but they don't know how to make relationships and connect with people the way that you do, right? And so I just think leading with that transparency is a great way to build trust and rapport with somebody. So the next episode, we're going to really dive into connecting sweat equity with capital and the ways that you've been able to build an entire business and really empire around that, $500 million in deals, $50 million in capital raised. And so we're going to dive into how you do that, the ways and some of the nuances behind connecting that, the sweat equity with the capital. It's a massive, massive opportunity in the space because so many people have deals, right? They do not know how to get the capital. Right. That's a massive opportunity in the space. And so I think that you're really going to ignite a whole community of people that want to be like you. They're like, I do not know how to find a deal, do construction, or manage properties. Right? I don't know how to do the sweat portion of it, but I do have a network. Right. And so we're going to dive into that on the next episode. And so I think everyone is going to want to tune in and check that out. They're going to learn more about your story and really hear the nuances behind it. So, one of the things we like to ask every single guest flies to Denver on the show in person. Actually, your first in-person studio. Yes. Of all the podcasts you've done over 30, this is the first one you've done in person, right? Yes. So the one thing that we like to ask is, what would you say is your superpower?
I love connecting people. And like you said, I am transparent. I share everything. I'm happy to teach. I share everything that I know. And even as a realtor, I always provide all the information. I'm never that person that's going to hide. But I think connecting people and networking is my superpower. I call myself the serial networker.
Huh. I mean, it's a great title. Obviously, the proof is in the pudding with your results the last 4 years. Right. The other question that I always love to ask people is, this show title is about mentors and mentorship. Yeah. Who has been an influential mentor in your real estate career, your transition from a non-related W-2 job to real estate? Who's been a mentor for you?
That's a good question. I actually got into the business not knowing anybody that was in commercial real estate. I didn't have a family member or a friend or anyone. My husband laughs. He's like, till today, he's like, I would have quicker believed that you would have been on a magic stage in Vegas than being commercial than being commercial real estate. He's like, how did you land here? I'm like, I don't know. Literally, we talk about this all day. We're like, how did we ever land here? I did not have any specific mentor that I was following getting started. But I just started by listening to as many podcasts as I can. Like I don't waste time. So between my kids, I'm either transacting deals. And if I'm not transacting deals and not with my kids, I'm listening to podcasts or attending classes and webinars. I try to sign up to everything that I can. And then I take bits and pieces of, from what I hear from many, many people. Yonah Weiss has been an inspiration in the field. He's a great connector. I learn a lot from him, and he has a wealth of knowledge. So he's been a great source in the business, and I'm thankful for him. But I pretty much listen to any podcast and pick up bits and pieces from everyone that I listen to.
Which is, a great starting point. You didn't have a direct mentor. You didn't go out there and drop a ton of money on a mastermind.
Right.
You went out there and used free resources, podcasts, or maybe bought some $10, $20 audiobooks off of Amazon. There's so much knowledge and so many of these internet mentors, not the right word, but mentors like Yonah, you don't know Yonah,
right,
but you consume all his information and you're like, oh, I know Yonah.
Yeah.
I've downloaded his brain. He's a great guy. I know he thinks I've learned so much. That is an amazing starting point for anyone out there. Is don't worry about an exact mentor that you can have lunch with. Do what you did. Go out there, learn, read books, listen to podcasts. That's the starting point right there.
Right. Also, practically, I couldn't join any masterminds because I cannot be committed to certain times. I have children. So every,
eight children.
eight children.
With this kind of energy. Everyone should really admire that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I can never commit to a set time. Like they meet Wednesdays at 10. It just doesn't work for me.
You might have soccer then.
Yeah, exactly. Or I'm driving them to school, carpool. Yeah. There's always something. So for me, it was also hard to commit to a certain group. I always considered, if I needed someone, I'd hire someone private, just on my own time. But so far, there's so many resources, like you said, there's tons of free info. And also, people getting into real estate, you can make so much money in so many different ways in real estate that you kind of want to see what's out there and learn a little bit about everything before finding your niche. And oftentimes masterminds have one intention. Whether they're focused on a specific market or a specific asset, go out there, see everything, and then dive into that particular market that you're interested in.
And when you talk about niches earlier, you don't stick to one niche, but from my perspective, you've doubled down on your superpower, which is connecting people. Exactly. And you focused on that. And whether you connect a person to investing in a fund or investing in a 10-unit multifamily or investing in this, you're focused on connecting people.
Exactly.
And that's the niche you have focused on.
Yeah. I love it. I really do.
So I know we got to wrap up here, get ready for show number 2 at our other location. How can people get a hold of you, learn more about you, and just pick your brain?
Besides for networking in person, it's also important to network online. So I'm very active on social media. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me as Esti Lowenbein. On Instagram as Esti Lowenbein. I'm on Facebook. I use all those platforms as business right now. I often share a lot about my family.
What's the best platform people connect with you on? Is there one that you really double down on? Well,
I love LinkedIn because it's a professional environment and you're meeting people that are like-minded and are growth-oriented. So I really like LinkedIn for that reason. But I feel like on any platform you can connect. You never know who's going to reach out to you and say, hey, I want to invest in that deal, or I want to partner up with you, or I have something for you to sell. So LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook are strong. And WhatsApp, I do a lot of WhatsApp. I post on my profile a lot, and I got a lot of traction over there too on my status.
Right. Well, viewers out there, make sure you connect with Esti. Make sure you connect with her on LinkedIn, WhatsApp. All the links will be in the show notes. And leave comments on here. I like it. Terrence likes it. Esti likes it. We'll be in the comments. And we will see you in the next episode. Thanks, everyone. You're listening to the Multifamily Mentor Show.
Join the conversation.